talk I gave 2 years ago that can help you with financial challenges you could be experiencing right now. This talk will help you identify the origins of those challenges and ultimately help you strengthen your financial health and well-being. This talk couldn't be more relevant right now, as many of us are struggling with how to be proactive in this new era of financial uncertainty. Please join me for the next 63 minutes as we explore the events in your family history, from breaks in the mother-child bond, to ancestors who lived impoverished lives, to family members who may have taken advantage of others or acquired wealth unjustly, or were cheated out of an inheritance, and much, much more. I call this talk an unwanted inheritance, how generational trauma affects our success. I hope you find it helpful.
Director of the Family Constellation Institute in San Francisco, Mark is a leading expert in the field of inherited family trauma. A sought-after lecturer, he is taught at the University of Pittsburgh, the Western Psychiatric Institute, Kripalu, the Omega Institute, the New York Open Center, and the California Institute of Integral Studies. Mark specializes in working with depression, anxiety, obsessive thoughts, fears, panic disorders, self-injury, chronic pain, and persistent symptoms and conditions. His book, It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle, is the winner of the 2016 Nautilus Book Award in Psychology. His articles have appeared in Psychology Today, Mind, Body, Green, MariaSchreiber.com, Elephant Journal, and Psych Central, and his poetry has been published in The New Yorker. Mark, welcome to the Money Medicine Summit.
Hi, everybody. What if I told you that your financial blueprint, the thoughts, feelings, patterns, and behaviors that you have around money was formed before you were even born? I'd like to begin with a story about a woman who, when she was 43, liquefied all her assets to follow her dream and open up a retreat center. Suffice to say, it didn't go well. She lost everything and sunk into a deep depression. When we looked into her family history, we saw that her father, also in his early 40s, made a bad business investment and lost all the family's money and had to declare bankruptcy. It didn't stop there. Looking back a generation further, his father, the grandfather, was tricked by another man out of his money and lost his life savings. He was also in his early 40s. This man ended up committing suicide. This is not an uncommon story, and it may even have a biological component. The newest epigenetic research tells us that the traumas of our parents and grandparents, and perhaps even our great-grandparents, can deeply impact us. And the effects of these traumas can be transmitted to us through gene changes in the DNA. We're not, as previously thought, born into this world with a clean hard drive, to use a computer analogy. Instead, there seems to be an operating system already in place, one that contains the fallout of the traumas that our parents and grandparents experienced. And as a result, we can be born with fears and feelings that don't always belong to us. Why is this? For this, we have to look at the science. When a trauma happens, it changes us. Literally, it causes a chemical change in our DNA, and this changes the way our genes function, sometimes for generations. Technically, after a trauma, a chemical signal or epigenetic tag can attach to our DNA and tell a cell
to use or ignore certain genes. And then the way our genes are affected can change how we act or feel. For example, we can become sensitive or reactive to situations that are similar to the original trauma so that we can deal with it better. And then these gene changes, as we're now learning, can be transmitted to our children and even to their children. If our grandparents, for example, came from a war-torn country, they can pass forward a skill set of sharper reflexes and quicker reaction times to help us survive the trauma that they experienced. The problem is, we can also inherit a stress response with the dials set to 10, and we're preparing constantly for this catastrophe that never arrives. Epigenetics is just one piece of the puzzle. This transmission can happen other ways as well. Embryologists have known for more than 100 years that when our grandmother is 5 months pregnant with our mother, the egg that will one day become us is already in our mother's womb, which is because the female egg line stops dividing when our mother is a fetus at 5 months. What does this mean? This means that 3 generations share the same biological environment, which means the traumas of our grandmother would percolate in her body, and our mother and the egg that would become us one day would know something about those traumas from a biological place. And if we add the work of Bruce Lipton to this puzzle, even more is revealed. He tells us that our mother's emotions can be chemically communicated to the fetus through the placenta, which can then biochemically alter our genetic expression. So, in our work today, we're going to look at how unresolved traumatic events in our family history can hinder our success. We'll look at how success flows to us or doesn't flow to us, and how well we're able to receive it. We'll talk about hidden dynamics in the family, dynamics that can affect us deeply. How, for example, we might share an unconscious identification with someone in the family who failed, or who was cheated, or who cheated someone, or with someone who received an undeserved inheritance, or with someone who was impoverished. These are just a few of the dynamics that can affect our ability to feel secure and financially vital. So first, before we get into epigenetic inheritance, it's important to know that one of the biggest contributors, if not the main contributor, to our financial blueprint, this financial blueprint we carry, is our early relationship with our mother. We are deeply impacted by how fully we were able or not able to take in her love. How we receive her love can be a blueprint for how we receive wealth and abundance. An infant's wealth and abundance is his mother's focused attention. When her focus is consistent, a child feels ecstatic and wealthy. When her love and attention is unpredictable or disengaged, a child can experience a form of emotional bankruptcy. These early experiences of getting a lot or not enough can forge a blueprint for how much we let ourselves receive later in life. When a mother's attention is repeatedly pulled away from her child, it can disrupt the delicate, but the delicate bond that's forming between them. The child can feel as though he's lost everything. That's because for an infant, a mother's attention is everything. When we have a break in the bond with our mother, it can be a challenge to feel safe and secure in life. If she was depressed or not in sync with us, we probably felt something must be wrong with me. Or we told ourselves, I don't matter. Or I'm not enough if I can't make her see me. Ultimately, we would feel alone and yearn for the security that's missing, literally the dopamine that's missing in the brain's reward motivation circuitry. When we have a break in the bond with our mother, we can carry feelings of unworthiness. And this can translate into self-deprecating beliefs such as, I'm not enough, or I'm not deserving, or no matter how much I have, I'll never have enough, or everything I have will be taken from me. Feelings like these often mirror the early experience of losing our mother's attention again and again. And we can develop self-sabotaging behaviors and poor decision-making skills that reflect how we feel inside about ourselves. For example, if as a newborn baby, our expansion into life, into the world, was met with, let's say, a difficult labor or a forceps delivery, or the terror of being given away, or the pain of our parents not staying together, or some other trauma. What can live in our body is the feeling, if something good happens to me, if I expand, it will be followed by something terrible. So any expansion I experience will be met with a great contraction. Hence, we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or unconsciously, we shut down to the good things in life. In other words, we sabotage our own success before it can be stripped away from us. When we have a break in the bond with our mother, we often carry a fear of being rejected or of being betrayed, or a fear of saying the wrong thing or losing the people close to us. We can also fear being judged by others, and so we might hold ourselves back from making important connections that can help us thrive in business. On the job, we can have the feeling of being expendable, or worry that we'll be fired, or we'll be ignored by the people we work with or our bosses, or we'll be left out of the group. And we end up feeling like the little child who has been left all alone, abandoned by his or her mother. So what do we do about this? The remedy is to heal our inner relationship with our mother and learn to practice receiving something good from her, even if she had very little to give. It's profound work to be able to take in her love, not as we expect it or as we want it to be, but just as it is, just the way she's able to give it. And the question that I ask is, can you let yourself receive her love just as it is, without expecting it to be any different? Now, many of us can't do this in real life because we don't feel safe, or we feel that the pain she caused us was too great, or that it was personally directed toward us. In my book, It Didn't Start With You, I teach how to heal these challenging relationships. In the book, you'll learn how to step into the larger picture by creating your family traumagram. You'll uncover the traumas that block the flow of love in your family. you'll see that it really wasn't personal at all, that any child in your birth order would have received similar mothering, and you'll learn how to heal these traumas. Having said that, it's extremely important to look into the family history. You'll see that it was only a trauma that blocked the love your mother was able to give. Understanding that is the first step to compassion. Compassion for her, as well as compassion for you and what you experienced. Now, there can also be early traumas that you experienced directly that blocked you from trusting your mother's love and being able to take that love in. Here are some of the questions that can help you identify some of these early traumas that may have affected the bond between you and your mother. Did something traumatic happen while your mother was pregnant with you? Did she lose her mother? Did your dad leave her? Did they fight a lot? Was he drinking? Was he cheating? Did her brother die? Did something happen with one of the other siblings while she was pregnant with you? The next question, was she highly anxious or depressed or stressed? We know that the stress of our mother is directly felt in utero by the fetus, hormonally. Were your parents having difficulties in their relationship during the pregnancy or even shortly thereafter? Did you experience a difficult birth? Were you born premature? Did they have to use forceps? Did your mother experience postpartum depression and you energetically felt her emotionally detach? Were you separated from your mother shortly after birth? Was she sick? Did she have to stay in the hospital? Were you given to your grandmom? Were you kept in an incubator? Were you adopted? Did you experience a trauma or separation from your mother during your first 3 years of life? Were you or your mother ever hospitalized and forced to be apart? Maybe there was that time in the incubator, or you had to go back into the hospital when you were 4 to have your tonsils removed or some other medical procedure. Or your mother needed to have a surgery, or there were complications from the birth or from the pregnancy, etc., etc. Did your mother experience a trauma or emotional turmoil during your first 3 years of life? It could be anything. The death of a parent. This could be in utero. It can be when you were a baby. It can be when you were a toddler. It can be all the way up to your probably 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. The death of a parent did she experience? One of your grandparents, or one of your siblings? Or did your parents split up, separate, or divorce? Did your mother, here's another question that could have affected you in utero. Did your mother give away the child before you, or did she lose a child in a pregnancy before you were born? And when you were in her belly, she couldn't attune for fear that she would lose you too. And maybe she told herself, I'll wait until I can feel this baby kicking, or I'll wait until this baby's born before I attune to this baby. Was your mother's attention pulled to a trauma involving one of your siblings, a late-term miscarriage, a stillbirth, a death, a medical emergency, anything? Did either your father or your mother have a break in the bond with his or her mother? What we're now learning from the science is that these early traumas, these breaks in the bond, are heritable. So what do we do if we suspect that we have a break in the bond with our mother, and that this break is affecting our financial situation? Well, if you can't heal your relationship with your mother in real time, you might consider this practice: placing a photo over your left shoulder, here, something like this, over your pillow, at night. So when you're lying on the pillow, this photo of your mother is taped to the wall. And you look up at night and you ask her to hold you as you sleep, even if she's alive. You might say something like, "Mom, please hold me." So you're telling this to the photo. "Mom, please hold me while I sleep and heal the bond that broke between us. Teach me how to trust your love, how to receive it, and how to let it in, so that I can allow the good things in life to come to me without sabotaging them or pushing them away." This is a profound practice. We know that by visualizing an experience, the same neurons, the same regions of the brain activate as though we're experiencing it in real life. Our brain doesn't know the difference from where the healing comes. It just comes. So I suggest, if you have a broken relationship with your mother, or she's passed away, or she lives in a different city, that you might put this photo over your left shoulder above your pillow at night while you sleep, against the wall, taped to the bed frame, and say these words: "Mom, please teach me how to trust your love and let it in, so I can have a better life, so I can receive the good things that come to me." Okay. If you're willing to work on your relationship with her in real time, call her on the phone, or Skype with her, or go see her in person and tell her sentences that can strengthen the bond between you. You might say things like, "Mom, I really like that we're close." Or tell her, "Mom, I'm sorry that I've been distant, or I've been, disconnected, or that I never come see you, or I rarely call. I promise to be closer to you from now on." You might even allow yourself to practice taking in her love while you're on the phone with her, or on Skype, or in person. Even eating her food, if this is the food she makes for you, if this is the only way she's able to love you. Try eating this food with the energy of, "This food is healing me. This food is nourishing my heart." As we said earlier, being able to take in her love is a metaphor for being able to take in abundance. One of the deepest practices I know for receiving her love might be just asking her to hold you while you breathe in, and you visualize that her care and nurturance is coming into your body and healing you and soothing your heart and literally changing your brain. When we reject our mother, we can unconsciously, without knowing we're doing this, distance ourselves from taking in the comforts of life, because mother represents comfort. She represents safety. She represents security. She represents nurturance, care. All these elements associated with mothering can feel missing in our lives. No matter how much we have, it can feel like we never have enough. So I want to say that again. When we can't take in our mother's love, all the elements associated with being mothered, security, safety, comfort, nurturance, these can all feel missing in our lives. No matter how much we have, it can feel like we never have enough. Rejecting either parent, mother or father, can have profound consequences. One of those consequences can be that we can repeat that parent's life experience. A strange symmetry linking us can occur. We can find ourselves unwittingly walking in their shoes. Whatever we judge as unacceptable or intolerable in them can reappear, can repeat in our life. It's strange because we assume the opposite's true. We think that the more we distance ourselves from our parents, the less likely we are to live similar lives or repeat their challenges or misfortunes. However, the converse appears to be truer. When we distance ourselves from them, we tend to become more like them and often lead lives similar to theirs. I'll give you an example. If our father is rejected in the family for being an alcoholic or a failure, we can drink or fail just like him. We'll unconsciously follow in his footsteps, sharing what we perceive is negative in him. Let me say that again. We'll unconsciously follow in his footsteps, sharing what we perceive is negative. I call this phenomenon merging. We don't need to reject our parents to merge with them. Sometimes we share an unconscious bond with a parent that we're close with. And in that bond, we repeat that parent's misfortunes. So despite our best efforts to succeed, we can find ourselves unable to achieve more in our lives than they achieved in theirs. If, for example, let's go back to this example of the father who fails in business. If our father failed in business or wasn't able to provide financially for our family, we might unconsciously join him by failing in the same way and sabotaging our own success. And in this way, we make sure that we don't do better than he did. In other words, we carry an unconscious loyalty not to be more successful than he was. When we merge with a parent, it means that we relive, we repeat a piece of that parent's life experience or life situation. This repetition often occurs at a similar age and often in a similar way. It's as though there's an ancestral alarm clock that starts ringing when we reach the same age as that parent or experience a similar life event or life situation. For example, if at age 40, our father loses all the family's money at the racetrack, let's say, his son around a similar age, 38, 39, 40, 41, could do something like invest all his family's money in a stock or a business that goes bad and he loses everything. Or let's say mother and grandma, they're both married to men who can't keep a job. And then the daughter, as soon as she's married, that's the trigger event. Her husband begins to fail or stops working. And so you see a pattern like this for 2 or 3 or even more generations. Many of us merge with our unhappy parents or parents who suffered or died young. Let's say our dad died early or was killed in a car accident or spent his life in jail or was poor and couldn't feed the family. We might find ourselves unwittingly suffering just like him, suffering similarly. It's as though there's an unconscious agreement at some level, like, Dad, I can't have more than you. Or, Dad, that you didn't do well, I won't do well. But of course, this will be unconscious. Or if the dad died, Dad, that you didn't live fully, I won't live fully. And this unconscious loyalty or this unconscious agreement can sit in the way of our success, our abundance, our ability to pull in money, keep our money, not squander it. be successful at work. Another way of merging is to atone for a crime that was committed in our family. We can unconsciously atone for the wrongdoings of a family member who harmed someone or treated someone or some people unfairly or engaged in an unjust business deal that hurt other people. For example, if our grandfather or our father owned a factory and made a fortune off the sweat and blood and toil of others who, let's say they were paid very little, we, generations later, could suffer or lose our nest egg or squander all of our money. When this happens, we have to ask ourselves, are we unconsciously attempting to balance the actions of someone who came before me? Am I losing or failing in connection to something behind in the family? Again, it's important that we do our traumograms and look in our family histories and see what took place before us that could be affecting us now. I'll tell you a case. I once worked with this lawyer who was a week away from closing his practice. He couldn't hold on to anything he earned. The bottom would always fall out of everything he tried to put together. And as I'm talking to him, and as I'm listening to him, he told me these words: I'm barely surviving. I barely have enough. And these words had meaning as I was listening. And as I heard them, I'm wondering, whose words were they? I mean, he's saying them, but whose words was I really listening to? And these sentences turned out to be quite significant. They echoed the voices of workers that his grandfather had taken advantage of. And the story goes like this. His grandfather had owned and operated a huge citrus plantation from the 1930s all the way up to the 1970s in Florida. And the family built its fortune on this business. And basically, they paid the migrant farm workers next to nothing. And these guys, these migrant farm workers, were barely, there's the words, barely surviving and living on meager wages, and they couldn't cover their debts, and they're living in squalor, literally dilapidated shacks, while the grandfather and his family, the little father, my client's father and the grandfather, they're living in this luxurious mansion. And my client even remembers as a little boy playing with their children, and he remembers feeling guilty of having more and them having less. Now, later in life, my client can't pay his bills or the loans he owed to the bank. And when we put the pieces together and he saw how his family had prospered while the migrant workers were barely surviving, he realized he was unconsciously aligned with the workers that his grandfather had harmed. And he was reenacting their misery. It was as though, again, some unconscious agreement by living impoverished. He thought that he could somehow, and this isn't conscious, this is unconscious, that he was somehow balancing his grandfather's debt, a debt that didn't even belong to him. To heal this, I'll call it an entanglement, I had this client visualize his grandfather, who had passed away when he was 12, standing in the spirit world in his inner image, with the migrant workers apologizing to them for not paying them what he deserved. He visualized his grandfather taking responsibility and making amends. And he imagined his grandfather saying to the workers, I'm sorry. And then saying to him, my grandson, this has nothing to do with you. This is my debt to pay, not yours. And then my client visualized the children that he used to play with smiling at him. And he could feel that they harbored no ill will, no ill feelings toward him. We talked about it afterward, and we realized that sometimes when we're really committed to our healing practice, that we've got to do things in real life. We've got to have some sort of practice that we can commit ourselves to. So my client said, well, he was going to contact some of these families, and that's what he tried to do. He tried to contact some of the migrant families, but as a kind gesture to do something good, but he couldn't find them. They were kind of off the map. So instead, he made a donation to a charity that focused on the healthcare needs of migrant families as a gesture of goodwill from his family to theirs. He also took a case pro bono as a lawyer of a worker who'd been mistreated by a large company, and his good fortune, well, his poor fortune changed. It turned into good fortune. Within weeks, several new clients had come his way, and within 6 months, his practice was thriving. But it took looking at the past to find the connection, to make the link, to see that he was connected with something that was affecting him in the now, in the present. So I'd like to share another case with you, a case of an unfair inheritance and how this affected a woman's life 2 generations later. The woman, she's in my book, Loretta for my book, although that's not her real name. She couldn't get ahead in life. And every time she had a chance to move forward, she had the opportunity to get a new job or had a chance to make more money, boom, something awful would happen, or she would self-sabotage, but something would come crashing down and set her back. She kept telling me, and again, I listen, you'll see in the book if you read it, and I hope you read it actually, because it's quite helpful. I listened to trauma language, and she kept telling me part of her trauma language was, I don't deserve to have what I get. And of course, I tucked that language gently up my sleeve as we were talking, and I'm thinking, who didn't deserve to have what they got? And this language, as we discovered, would have its roots right there in the family history. Here's what happened. Loretta's grandmother left the family farm to Loretta's father and left nothing to Loretta's father's 4 brothers and sisters. So the father goes on to flourish, and the 4 brothers and sisters went on to struggle. Literally, they had nothing, and this one brother had everything. And the siblings were never close again after that. So Loretta's father had gained an unfair advantage over his siblings. Now, as an adult, Loretta is struggling financially, just as her aunts and uncles had struggled. Again, unconsciously, as though to balance the undeserved inheritance, Loretta was holding herself back, of course, again, unconsciously, from success. Once she realized that she was involuntarily attempting to balance a wrongdoing that she wasn't even responsible for, she was able to change her life, and she did. There are many other dynamics that can affect us financially. One is when a family member dies early and is perceived not to have completed his or her life. For example, if we had a brother, let's say, who died young or died stillborn, we can stop short of completing something important in our life. We might not finish college or school or some other accomplishment that would bring us success. We could even become a procrastinator in life, never finishing what's essential, the way this person never finished his or her life. We can also limit our life out of loyalty to a family member who had a mental, physical, or emotional challenge. Loyal to this aunt or this uncle or this parent or grandparent or older sibling whose life we perceived as restricted in some way, we can unconsciously restrict our lives similarly and limit our own achievements. We can also share an unconscious allegiance with the ancestors in our family who lived in poverty or experienced great hardships, perhaps in the old country, or when they came here, or during the Depression, or maybe we come from a family that's impoverished. Unconsciously, we can continue this suffering without realizing we're doing so. It can be difficult to have more than they had. Often doing a simple ritual that honors these family members can ground us so we can move forward. This is what I teach how to do in my book. I teach how to heal these traumas so we can begin to have a much freer life. Ultimately, the effects of unresolved traumas in our family, the effects of a bad relationship with our parents, or a break in the bond with our mother, or entanglements with other family members who suffered, these can all be obstacles that stand in the way of our success. Once we make the link to the past and integrate what needs to be integrated, the unfinished business from the past can remain in the past, and this can allow us to move forward with more freedom and more financial ease. So I'd like to, at the end of this talk, I realize there's some questions that have been submitted by people who signed up early, but before I answer those, I'd like to go over my 21 success questions that can guide you into looking into your family history and seeing if there is something back there that may be affecting you, exploring how your family history can influence or diminish your success in some way. So the first question I always ask, did you have a challenging relationship with your mother? Next question, 2, did you have a challenging relationship with your father? 3, were your parents successful at what they did for a living? Or did they fail? 4, did a parent fail in providing for the family? 5, did your parents separate when you were young? Because this separation can align you with one parent against a parent, and it can also break the bond with your mother if she was stressed out and not doing so well during the separation. Number 6, what was your mother's attitude towards your father? Did her attitude pull you away from having the freedom to be close with him? Likewise, on the other side, what was your father's attitude towards your mother? Did this attitude pull you away from being close to your mother? When you were young, number 8, did you experience a physical or emotional separation, a break in the bond from your mother, with your mother? Number 9, did your mother, father, grandmother, grandfather die young? Number 10, did you, your parents, or your grandparents have any siblings that died young? And could you be entangled with those siblings, living a life that's incomplete, like the life they didn't get to live? Number 11, did you or anyone in your family gain significantly at someone else's expense? Number 12, was anybody in your family cheated out of inheritance or conversely, did anybody in your family cheat someone else out of their inheritance? Number 13, did anybody in your family inherit or acquire wealth unjustly? Number 14, did anyone in your family go bankrupt or lose the family wealth or cause the family members that he or she was responsible for to experience financial difficulty? Number 15, did anyone outside your family cause your family to experience financial difficulty? Or vice versa. Number 16, was anyone rejected in your family, for being a failure, a loser, a gambler, a womanizer, etc.? Number 17, did anyone lose a home or possessions and then had difficulty recovering, and you could be aligned with this difficulty? Number 18, did you have impoverished ancestors? Number 19, did you or your parents emigrate from another country? And what happened there? And what happened to your home and your situation? What forced you to leave? Number 20, were your family members forced to flee or driven out of their homeland? And lastly, number 21, did you or anyone else in your family hurt, cheat, or take advantage of someone? In my book, as I said before, I teach more about how to heal these traumatic imprints because that's what they become. I also teach workshops online and trainings online and physically in several cities around the world. Please visit my website for more information, www.markwallyn.com. Okay, let me get to some of these questions. I see there are several here in my box. All right, the first one from Jillian from Winnipeg. What are the first steps I need to take to figuring out for myself what I may have inherited that could be affecting my success and my ability to hold on to money? Okay, good question. So in this talk, I suggest you revisit this talk and look at the questions, the early trauma questions with your mother that I put up on the screen, and the later 21 questions that can affect our success, and sort of like a checkbox them in a way, and to see if any of these things happened in your family. Of course, in my book, I have a whole chapter devoted to financial success and failure and money and abundance. So please read my book. In the book, what you'll learn is to pull out your trauma language. And your trauma language is the language that sits beneath the belief system that you have around money and success and abundance. Sentences like we saw in my presentation, like I don't deserve to keep what I have, or I lose everything that comes to me. And we can follow this trauma language back into the family history by creating a genogram, what I call a traumagram, of all the traumatic events and what happened to members of our family. It's quite simple. Then we begin to follow the trail, what I call the breadcrumb trail of the breadcrumb trail of trauma back into our family history through this trauma language. It's a good place to start. So look at this talk again, please, and check mark those questions, the early trauma questions about your relationship with your mother, and then the family history questions. And that would be a very good place to start, Jillian. Thank you for the question. Okay, question number 2 from Christina in Vancouver. Both of my parents were in residential schools. How does this impact me? I'm constantly struggling financially. And more importantly, what can I do about it? Yeah, great question. Thank you. The trauma of residential schools is a great trauma. Often a child is pulled away from his family, pulled away from the parents early, often around age 5. And this creates a great break in the bond with the mother. This is the first trauma that arises out of the overarching trauma of residential schools. And then comes the horror of deculturalization and the breaking up of the family and the abuse, the rape, the beatings, all the terrible things that come from this particular trauma. And yes, it has a great impact in subsequent generations. The first of which, if your parents were in residential schools, they were disconnected from their mothers way too early. And as we already know, these traumas of, well, you'll learn in my book from the science, you'll see that being pulled away from the mother too early creates a trauma of the break in the bond, which leads to depression, anxiety, symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, et cetera, et cetera. So secondly, not only do we have the trauma of the break in the bond with a mother, a child being separated way too early, we have the identification with, that's us, unconsciously joined with family members who suffered or didn't do well. Because many times when we come out of the residential bond school, we come out into a life that may not work as fully as we would like because of these traumas. We experienced great trauma. We saw other people experiencing great trauma. And maybe we can't hold on to our relationships or our own money, or financially we live lives that are difficult. So there's a second trauma here. I've inherited my mother's break from her mother, or I've inherited my father's break from his mother, or because my parents were broken from their parents, they couldn't give what they didn't have. So I too have a break in the bond with my mother. And this would be the first place, Christina, I would have you look. I would have you attend to this bond and to see if there's a way to repair it. I have a whole chapter in my book about that, about repairing breaks in the bonds with our mother. But ultimately, I would ask you to begin to receive from her, because what happened to her wasn't personal to you. And she experienced great misfortune in the residential school, which certainly blocked what she could receive from her mother. And going back, her mother might have been in residential school, but it turned this way, it would have affected what you were able to receive. So without feeling this was personal, is there a way you can begin to, as a child again, receive what she can give, even though you're an adult, and take in her love and care and nurturance just as she gives it, not as you expect it. And perhaps even asking her to cook for you or to hold you, or even lying in her lap if possible and asking her just to stroke your hair or hold your heart. This would be an excellent way to begin the healing. Another facet is, am I joining unconsciously, connected unconsciously, merged or identified unconsciously with my parents or grandparents or family members who suffered in residential schools? And then there's a way to even break that identification as well. Simply even perhaps looking at their photos, lighting a candle and saying, I know you suffered terribly, but please bless me when I go on to do well, even if I'm the first one in the family who does well. I know that's what you want for me. And unconsciously, I may suffer in a silent collusion, or I may suffer unconsciously without even knowing I'm doing it. So lighting this candle or looking at the photo and saying, please bless me to do well, to be wealthy, to hold on to money, even though money didn't always come easily to you. I hope that's helpful, Christina. Those two places. Work on repairing the bond with your mother and disentangling from the unconscious loyalty to suffer the way they suffered. Okay, the next question comes from Paul from Little Rock. Can I have more than one dynamic going on? Yes, you can. And if so, how do I prioritize them? Good question. So there is a hierarchy. I always look first to heal the break in the bond with our mother because it's the earliest and often the deepest, which is what I said in my lecture. I called it the greatest contributor, perhaps the greatest contributor to our financial blueprint is our early relationship with our mother. So it's often true that we can have a break in the bond with our mother, and then we reject her, and then we merge with her and live a sorrow-filled life just like her. So often these dynamics come in pairs or triplets. Again, we have a break in the bond with our mother, and then we reject her, and then in rejecting her, we merge with her and repeat her misfortunes. So having said that, and with our father, the same, we could reject our father and then find that we repeat and live a life similar to his. So what do? We stop rejecting or excluding or pushing anyone away in our family, which is not easy medicine for many people because it's hard to be or open a place in our hearts for people who were difficult. But remember, a parent's or a person's difficulty often comes from traumas that blocked the flow of love that they could receive. It wasn't personal. So if our father or our mother had traumas, which I'm sure they did, those traumas would affect the love they could give, which I'm sure it did, and the love we could receive. Number one, can we heal that relationship with our mother? Can we look behind our parents and look at these traumas and build compassion for not just for ourselves, for what happened, but also for them? So rather than seeing our parents as cruel or vindictive or abusive, we can just see that something terrible happened to them that blocked that flow of love that they could receive. Sometimes a deeper way of connecting with our parents is through understanding and compassion. That would be a good start, Paul. Okay, we have another question from Melanie from Port Moody. How can I figure out my family history when there's no one left to speak about it? Am I just out of luck? Yeah, good question. No, you're not out of luck. The traumas exist, even if you don't know about them, in your repetitions, in your behaviors, in the relationship choices you make, that you keep making, the potholes you continually step in, the behaviors that seem to spring out of nowhere after a particular event happens. In other words, we are the what happened, even if we don't know what happened, because many of us are adopted or our parents don't talk about the past or they've passed away. This language lives in what I call our core language, which is our trauma language. It's in the words we speak, as well as the behaviors that repeat, as well as the choices that we make, as well as how we lose money, what happens before we self-sabotage. So again, taking you back to my book, I don't mean to do this, but taking you back to the book, I teach readers to become detectives of their family history and detectives of their core language. So we learn in the book how to trace the things that happen to us back into events in the family history that we know about and to events that we don't know about. For example, if there's something that we don't know about in the family history, which is quite common, we know it's there because we are living proof through these repetitions that something like this, that loses in this way, that suffers in this way, that self-sabotages in this way, must have happened in our family history because it's in us. Okay, there's one more okay, this question comes from your Money Summit organizers, Carrie and Christina. What is your personal aha money moment? That's a good question. You know, I have to tell a very personal story about my dad for this, really. I remember the first time I spoke at a conference, and I was speaking to 150 people, many of whom were doctors, and I was speaking about self-injury, which is another one of my focuses. And I was about to go on and talk, and I remember early that morning calling my dad on the phone. My dad was still alive back then. This was before he had Alzheimer's, and saying, Dad, I just need to call you. And I didn't know why I was calling him. But I said, Dad, I just want to tell you what I'm doing today. And he said, yeah, tell me what you're doing. And my dad was an uneducated guy. He never went to college and was a laborer his whole life and, worked with his hands. And here I was going to do this intellectual achievement of which my dad didn't have those. And I was saying, Dad, I'm about to go on and talk to all these people about the work I do. And I didn't realize it. But what I was doing was unconsciously asking my father permission to do better than him. And I didn't realize it till afterwards. But his response was beautiful. He said, I'm going to wait here by this phone until you call me back and you tell me what happened. And I did. And it was quite beautiful.